Welcome to this explainer. Look, we've all heard the pitch, right? AI agents are going to swoop in, take all those tedious tasks off our plates, and, well, for some of us, there's this lingering fear that they'll just automate our jobs out of existence completely. But as we actually start looking at the hard data from the modern workplace, a massive, totally counterintuitive reality is emerging. Agents aren't going to take our jobs because, ironically, they are generating an incredible amount of new work for humans to do. Everyone buying into the AI dream right now is doing the exact same math. If the agent does the work, I need fewer people doing the work. But it turns out that math is entirely wrong.
Now, what's really interesting about this is a staggering piece of data straight from OpenAI. They found that their heaviest Codex users are regularly generating more than 60 hours of agent activity every single day. Just think about that for a second. There are literally only 24 hours in a day. Absolutely no one has the time to sit there and watch 60 hours of automated work unfold step by step. Which naturally leads us to a pretty massive question. If nobody can physically monitor 60 hours of output, what happens next? How on earth are we supposed to manage this absolute explosion of automated work without just drowning in supervision? When the agent produces more work than a human can possibly double-check manually, our entire relationship to our jobs has to fundamentally shift. To really grasp the sheer scale of this shift, we need to look at OpenRouter. Between February and August of this year, agent token usage didn't just grow, it absolutely skyrocketed, a 14-fold jump. Right now, agents are burning through more than 5 tokens for every single one a human burns. 5 to 1. The volume of output being generated is completely unprecedented, and it's vastly outpacing our human input. And that brings us to the core thesis of this explainer, the great agent myth. Because instead of neatly taking work off our plates so we can go clock out early, agents are actually giving us more work to do. They're generating this massive new management workload. We aren't being replaced. We are being rapidly promoted to middle managers of digital workers, and it's creating an entirely new bottleneck in our daily workflows. Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1, the Jevons effect in AI. To understand why our workloads are actually multiplying rather than shrinking, we have to borrow a classic economic theory. It's called the Jevons paradox. The basic idea is that when you make a resource much more efficient to use, you don't actually end up using less of it, you use way more. So as AI gets faster, cheaper, and better at executing tasks, we don't just stop at our usual workload. We ask it to do significantly more. We spin up extra agents to run overnight. And because they're doing more, they inevitably require more of our time to instruct, check, and manage. Efficiency doesn't shrink the human role, it expands the volume of work we're responsible for. You can see this new division of labor perfectly in a recent Anthropic study. They analyzed 400,000 Claude coding sessions. And guess what? Humans were still making about 70% of the planning decisions. We're still doing the heavy lifting, figuring out what ought to be built, supplying the context, and setting the goals. The agent? It's just making almost all of the execution decisions, finding the files, typing the code, running the tests. Our human minds are entirely occupied with planning and steering. And this leads to an even more surprising reality about expertise. You'd probably assume a total domain expert would just let the AI run perfectly on autopilot, right? Actually, no. The Anthropic data showed that expert users interrupt the agent nearly twice as often as beginners do. 9% of the time on conversational turns, compared to just 5% for novices. Beginners tend to be a bit more deferential to the AI. But experts? Because they know the domain inside and out, they spot plausible mistakes instantly. Being really good at your job literally means you spend more time actively managing and correcting the AI.
Section 2, the small business struggle.
So, we've looked at the individual worker, but what happens when we scale this up to small and medium businesses? Well, the financial reality hits pretty hard. According to a JP Morgan study analyzing 4.6 million small businesses, almost 2/3 of them are paying for AI at a rate of only about $40 a month. Now, $40 a month buys you a couple of seats on a standard language model. It buys you a glorified chatbot. It absolutely does not buy you a deeply integrated, autonomous business manager that can proactively fix pipelines or handle complex bookings. SMB owners are cash-strapped and time-poor. They just want outcomes without having to suddenly become full-time AI managers. And when they try to push these cheap, unmanaged agents too far, complete disasters happen. Take the highly visceral story of Pocket OS, a small software company for car rental businesses. The founder asked a coding agent to handle a totally routine task in a test environment. At 0 seconds, the agent hit a credential error, found an account-wide token, and just decided to delete an entire live storage volume. 9 seconds later, the live database and all ordinary backups were entirely gone. Car rental operators completely lost the ability to assign cars or find reservations. The human founder then spent the next 30 agonizing hours working pen and paper with every single client to keep them operating. The agent did catastrophic damage in 9 seconds. The human took 30 hours to clean it up. Section 3. Power of verifiable domains. So, the crucial point is that disaster perfectly illustrates why haphazardly throwing agents at a business usually fails. But some businesses are actually seeing incredible success, and it comes down to a really important new concept, the verifiable domain. A verifiable domain is just a specific field where a human can easily prove if an agent's output is factually right or wrong. Outside of coding, if you can't easily verify the AI's work, that management tax, the time spent checking and rechecking, becomes way too expensive for cash-strapped SMBs. You literally end up spending more time verifying the work than you would have spent just doing it yourself in the first place. But look at what happens when a field is highly verifiable. The legal field acts almost like coding for human language. It's highly structured and totally rules-based. Because it's so verifiable, legal AI usage, specifically measured by Codex, has absolutely exploded this year, growing roughly 108-fold from January to August. Lawyers already have a strict system to easily verify output against existing case law. To really anchor this concept, look at a small personal injury firm called Trumbull & Singer. They use AI to review medical records and prep the first drafts of demand packages. It's saving them 40 staff hours a month. And the secret sauce? The lawyers aren't inventing a brand new way to judge the agent. They are simply letting the AI do the heavy prep work for a review process they were going to do anyway. The agent creates the draft, the human easily verifies it. That is the winning formula for smaller teams. Section 4. How enterprises scale agents. But what happens when you actually have the resources to force AI to work, even in sticky, non-verifiable domains? Well, when you compare time-poor SMBs to massive enterprises, it is quite literally night and day. Large enterprises are well capitalized. They can afford to absorb that massive human labor cost required to integrate agents safely. They're hiring internal InfoSec teams, quality control personnel, and custom engineers just to ensure the AI has the right permissions and connects cleanly to internal data. They aren't outsourcing the management. They're building an entire human infrastructure around the AI to manage it. And this brilliantly illustrates how that deep, expensive integration actually pays off. OpenAI data shows that back in January, their heaviest enterprise users were generating 2.6 times as many output tokens as typical users. Fast forward to June, and that gap has widened to an 8.3 times multiplier. Enterprises are just rapidly pulling away from the pack in sheer productivity because they've invested the human capital required to properly manage, scale, and integrate these agents across their whole organization. Section 5. Moving above the loop. So let's zoom back out to the big picture for a second. What does this new reality mean for our actual daily job descriptions? Well, a fascinating field experiment at Procter & Gamble with over 700 employees proved that just tossing an agent at a solo worker isn't the ultimate magic bullet. While one person using AI produced work equal to a two-person team without it, when it came to achieving the absolute top 10% of best results, only teams of humans using AI together could hit that mark. True top-tier work still demands human teams iterating, debating, and managing the AI collaboratively to get the very best answers. Which means our daily work is radically shifting. We're moving from being in the loop of execution to being above the loop. Consider this new job description. The human role is now all about picking verifiable work, granting precise permissions, rigorously checking results, and strategically allocating agent compute hours. Industry insiders are literally starting to compare this new agent allocation role to the responsibilities of an L7 matrix manager at Amazon. You are managing resources, mitigating risks, and directing workflows, even if your direct reports happen to be lines of code rather than human beings. So yes, agents are absolutely creating more work, but it's a completely different kind of work. The management tax is very real, and honestly, mastering it is going to be the defining career skill of the next decade. So as these systems inevitably scale up all around you, instead of fearing job replacement, ask yourself this. As agents scale up at your company, are you ready to step above the loop and manage them? Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer. See you next time.